Welcome to the new For Purpose CEO podcast.
I'm Michelle.
I am Danielle, and we are here to talk about being a CEO in the for-purpose sector. Each episode, we will talk about issues not-for-profit and for-purpose CEOs need to manage based on our 30-plus years of experience. It will be an honest discussion of the highs and the lows, helping you tackle the unique challenges of running a NFP.
Leading can be challenging and sometimes lonely. We get it. Join us and our guests weekly for an honest discussion about running a for-purpose organisation. We will be sharing practical tips, shared experiences and real-world stories to help you tackle the unique challenges of running a for-purpose organisation.
Welcome back. Today, what we thought that we would talk about is organisational culture, but specifically focused on if you are a new CEO to an organisation, what types of things you can look out for and what types of activities that you could complete compared to the existing culture.
If you're a new for-purpose CEO and you're stepping into an organisation, I think one of the things that hits you in the face is what is the existing culture. And, you could have been talking about the culture when you're interviewing. The board and other people who you interview could say it's fabulous. Or more often what I've actually experienced is people are pretty open about, it's good, but there's areas of challenge or there's pockets. And so people, when you're interviewing, I think to be a CEO, they do have to be fairly, hopefully they're honest. In my experience, they normally are honest.
Do you think that the board, because that's your interviewing, so you're having a conversation with the board or the recruiting panel from the board about the organisation's culture. Do you think that the board generally has a good sense of what that would be?
In my experience, not all the time. So what I would say is that if there's a problem, hopefully they'll know about it if it's a problem. And I've walked into organisations where people have been quite honest about the fact that theirs is not perfect. But I agree with your point in the sense that often there is a problem with culture and the board isn't aware of either the extent of it or the serious nature of it or how widespread it is. I have had experiences with boards where they have been quite blindsided when, for example, something's come up and they're like, wow, we had no idea it was this kind of serious. But I think you should, throughout the interview process, have a bit of a heads up, and you should be asking questions as well, right? Like if you're interviewing, you should actually just ask, what is the culture like and how do you know that? And, you should actually be able to have that conversation.
And also observing the board's culture, their own dynamic, because that has an influence in the organisation itself as well. So I think what we're also saying is, yes, through that initial interviewing process, do that assessment, but also when you are appointed, congratulations, and then you start in the role to have a really open mind about what the culture might be or what is your expectation of the culture, given you would be influenced through that recruitment process and, the pretty website and all the glossy brochures.
Oh, yeah, hopefully you don't walk in and go, oh, my God, welcome to hell.
Yeah. But then, so what indicators can you then start to look at and understand, and what kinds of things can you do as the new CEO to, I suppose, build your own interpretation and understanding what the culture is?
Yeah, well, I think there's two steps to it. One is if you've just started, you want to understand what the culture is. Two, you then need to go, okay, if this is the culture that I'm seeing, is this actually the culture that I want to be in and that I want to lead?
And does that culture align with the strategic direction? Will that culture enable you as a CEO to reach the objective of the strategic direction?
Well, yeah. Does it align with the stated values of the organisation? So I think there's almost the two steps, which is one, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you observing in behaviours? What are you hearing? And then two, okay, so my analysis of this, does it align with what I was told in the interview process or the outside perception or what is required to achieve the strategic objectives? And what are the values? Do they align? And then my most favourite question in the whole world, so what am I now going to do about this if I need to move the culture, influence the culture, change the culture? And I think that's the kind of, oh my God, this is bigger than Ben-Hur realization that you often get as a new CEO, because you start talking to people and it takes a few weeks, people will start opening up to you, and then you think, okay, this is good, but actually we've got an issue here. And now how do I deal with it? Because you've got a bit of leeway as the new person. You can do some things.
You've got a bit of a grace period.
Exactly. But I also think that if things are brought to your attention and you don't like them and you don't respond, then that could be seen as endorsing them as well. So I think you've got to be really careful when you start what you're actually going to address. And, you know, you can't address everything straight away, right? Like, so imagine if you've gone into something which is horrendous, hopefully you're not, but you can't address everything. But I would be surprised, am I a cynic? Possibly, but I would be surprised if you walk into somewhere and there's not a few issues to deal with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is no perfect culture and there's no perfect functioning of an organisation as well. So there's always going to be something, and people can have different perspectives about the importance or seriousness of them as well. So let's talk about, like, what are some of the indicators if you walk in as a new CEO and, you know, you're saying, I want to get to understand what is the standardized behavior here? How do things work around here? What do people think about this organisation? What makes people want to come to work every day? What are some of the indicators as new CEO you can look for? Because you're not going to run a survey. You're not going to run a culture survey because
that will make you so unpopular straight away. I mean, I have to say, we were joking about this earlier. I mean, we did do an earlier episode about how and when you would actually survey your organisational culture. And I think there is huge value in doing an organisational culture survey as part of, you know, it's one tool to help you understand your culture. But I would strongly suggest that if you're going in new, that's not something you do straight away.
You might look at some historical surveys to see, if the organisation has done culture surveys or engagement or whatever surveys, there might be some trends, not necessarily do a deep analysis, but there might be some trends. There might be some commentary that's really helpful to get a feel.
I mean, there'll be the usual HR type statistics, you know, what's your turnover been?
Are people taking annual leave?
And also that Monday, Friday sickness thing, that old one. And so I think you look at the data, like you definitely look at the data that hopefully does exist. I'm a big one for trying to get as many one-on-ones done when I start something, because I think it's really an opportunity for you to hear directly, and hopefully in setting up that kind of a safe space for people to talk with you. Now, they don't know you. So, I mean, I would also suggest that you can't expect everyone to be brutally honest in everything. I think that they're also sussing you out a bit. But I do think you really need to set the tone with your one-on-ones and be direct, say that the reason you want to know what's going on is so that you can ensure that the culture is supportive, high-performing, safe, you know, all the things. Like, decide what are your key elements in a culture that you want to work in and that the board has articulated, hopefully, and if they haven't, then it'll be up to you to work with the board to articulate what is the desired culture and what does that mean. So I would do a lot of one-on-ones initially. What about you?
Yeah, same. I know there's a couple of points I want to make to that. I know a CEO who actually did that before their start date. So they had not yet formally started, but they were given access to some employees within an organisation. And so they did a little bit of a roadshow travelling around and just having one-on-ones with people. And so that really helped for them on day one. They had a really good sense of sort of the strength of the organisation, what people really valued, why they were turning up to work, but they also had a sense of what were some of the concerns or worries of some staff, and so they could start to plan from the get-go. So I found that really interesting, and I thought it was a really good idea, and it built a lot of goodwill as well with the people that they had spoken to. Yeah, I agree having those one-on-ones, but also be strategic about who they're with, because depending on the size of the organisation, you may not be able to get around to everybody.
Well, absolutely. And so it might be that there's teams or...
That's right. So it's, you know, get a sense of the organisational structure, who's who in the zoo, like who do they report to. You might want to align that to business performance as well to see if there's a particular business unit or team that's underperforming. You might want to prioritise them to understand what's going on there and to perhaps talk to a manager, talk to small groups as well. So you might want to do a little bit of segmentation in that, depending on the size of your business. If it's a smaller organization, that's a little easier to do, to get around quickly. Larger organizations, I do think you need to be a bit more strategic and then kind of collate all of that information and all of that data around turnover and tenure and sick leave and those sorts of things, and see what kind of picture is presented for you.
But I think you can ask some clever questions as well, though, where it's not, because you're new. So you will ask questions like about the systems, about the processes, about the reporting. And I think the answer to those kind of questions can also show up issues or positive culture, negative culture. So, if you're talking about business process or systems and you say, how does this happen? Or do people work together on this? The responses to those kind of questions, I think, also end up being quite illuminating, whether it's that the systems don't work, so we just ignore them and everything's a workaround, or actually that's that team, and so is there kind of a number of silos, or I think you can pick up a lot quite quickly without necessarily saying, okay, what's the culture like? You can ask, how things get done. How do people understand how decisions are made? I also do ask quite a few direct questions, and I guess it's up to your personality as a CEO and what kind of culture you want to cultivate. But, if you ask people, is there much conflict? That's quite a direct question, but if people really hesitate to answer, then that to me also would say, okay, so there's something going on. I don't know what it is yet, but if people can't give me a no, then I'm assuming there's something.
I think one of the things you've also spoken about, that scenario, I've been here a month, what's likely to surprise me? And that really gets people to think about, oh, this is what's coming for you type of thing. I've read that. I was like, oh, I wish I'd asked that. I don't know what people would have said, but I wish I'd asked that because, when you're a CEO coming in, you open a lot of cupboards and a lot of drawers, and there's always something in one of those cupboards that you never expected that you have to deal with. So, and the thing is, that also says to your people, I trust and I respect the experience and the wisdom that you have. And so please, if you can forewarn me, that would be really helpful.
I think you are actually role modelling behaviour then that you want. So, for example, if someone says to you, okay, actually there's been this disaster or there's been this stuff up or actually this didn't turn out the way we want, the way you react the first few times that happens is going to very quickly set the tone of how people will deliver you information. So I think one of the very important things as a new CEO is that you are being watched. Everyone is like, who is this new CEO? If they don't know you, they may very well know you, but what are they expecting? What are they looking for? People who are reporting to you or people who are, reporting to your direct reports are very much going to be looking to your behaviour, your responses, your communication style, and, hopefully be led in a positive way by that. But I think you cannot underestimate how your own role modelling of behaviour and communication style is going to impact and influence the culture of the organisation.
And so that's really then relevant to values alignment, isn't it? So people are looking at you as the new CEO and what your behaviour and your particular leadership style is, and they will be looking and comparing that to the stated values.
Which you might have on the wall to reference to an earlier podcast.
I would not agree. I suggest you go and listen to another podcast about should you hang your values on the wall.
FYI,
no.
Yes, yes. So,
but back to the topic at hand, people will be comparing, is this new CEO, behaving the way our values state that they will? And you as a CEO are also going to be saying, are the people in this organisation behaving the way the values state that they will? And if there's misalignment, there's a great opportunity there, isn't there, to sort of bring that together to start to build the culture to where you need it to be.
Well, I would say that it's a great way of then having the conversation, which is, I think there's two things. One is, what are the values and are they lived? Are they aligned with the way people are behaving? And so then I would have that conversation. But also I think it's the accountability. So if there is behaviour, processes, systems, like missing deadlines, not doing things you said you would do, which, really impacts from a business side as well. How do you, as the CEO, ensure that there is accountability and people take responsibility for what they're supposed to do? And I think if you've got a culture or you've inherited a culture where accountability is an issue, I think that's really quite hard, because it's unlikely that it's throughout the whole organisation. It's normally going to be in pockets. And if that's been going on for a while, then that's something I really do feel you need to address. But it could be quite sensitive or quite hard to address. So I think it's one of those things of trying to get all the facts around what's the current status, how long has it been going on, and why? Why is there this lack of accountability?
Yeah, in another situation, there was an organisational culture that had sort of fallen to a level of dysfunction. And we actually did a really extended workshop where we used the fishbone diagram, or the Ishikawa diagram, and the 5 whys. So rather than just call out the culture and say, it's bad, we have to change it, we did, using the fishbone diagram, some really deep thinking and really deep diving in it to understand what the causal factors of that were, so that we could then go straight to the cause. And we could then apply a good solution or good strategies to address those causes to influence a shift in behaviour and systems and processes. That was the benefit to the organisation. It was very long and extensive, but it was actually super effective. And it basically was saying, we need to do something about the culture, but we're not going to do it. It's not going to be morning teas. It's not going to just be a shout out. We're going deep into our systems and we're trying to understand what it is, and we're going to address it from the cause outwards.
That is one option, right? So if you have the time and you can do it, then that is fantastic. I think that one important thing is that training and giving people a common language around acceptable behaviour, communication styles, leadership. And so I think one of the things as well that you can then say is, okay, so if we need to address some things sooner rather than later, it may be that it's, a senior leadership team coming together for a workshop, half a day, a session, which is, okay, so how do we build teams? How do we communicate in our teams? How do we communicate across teams? What do we do if our teams aren't working well together? And get that alignment across the senior leaders, because I think that then also lets you very much say what is expected. But also, if it's senior leaders in a room, they may hopefully be able to speak to conflict between teams or processes that aren't working. That can be a really effective way of also dramatically improving culture.
Yeah, and I think the point you're trying to make there is you're bringing alignment together of what the expected behaviour and the processes, systems, the way we do things around here. You bring that alignment. And it also puts responsibility on the CEO that when you get agreement on that, it's like, well, you as the CEO, you're going to be held to a higher standard. You're going to be looking for your follow-up in that behaviour. You're going to be looking for you endorsing that behaviour, holding to account if it's not followed through by other people, but also championing it and communicating it over and over and over again. So people are very clear about what it looks like, how it works, what its function is, what are the expected outcomes.
Yeah. I'm always pretty open about what I think good culture is. So I will always say the kind of culture that I would like to build, how I would define good culture. And then it's also the examples, so this means that we do X, Y, Z. This means we don't do X, Y, Z. So, I'm a really big one on ensuring that there's feedback, that there's honest feedback delivered appropriately and nicely. And so I think one of the things is then if you are able to deliver feedback and deliver it in a supportive way, but honesty is one of my key values, you need to then train people. If they say, oh, well, I'm really bad at giving feedback, then people need to be trained how you give good, supportive, valuable feedback, because you are also then saying to the more junior members of the organisation to expect feedback. That one of our ways of doing things around here is that we will teach you. We will ensure that you grow when you're in the organisation, and we will upskill you by giving good feedback. And I think that as you kind of move from being more junior to middle to senior, Feedback is so needed, but so many people say to me, oh, I don't like giving feedback, or it's so hard to give feedback.
Which I think stems from the fact that they probably didn't get good feedback, or their manager similarly wasn't very good at it. I think that's a role modeling issue often in my experience. But you're right, if that happens, then there can be things put in place for that. That's not an impossible shift. I think the other thing, just I was listening and thinking about when you talking to people about what is the culture, what does that look like? What does it not look like? Is also to amplify the good things that are in that culture. As a new CEO, you will find things that will surprise you, pleasantly surprise you in the culture that is not apparent because it's more of a feeling and not written on a glossy brochure or in the annual report. And so it's really also extracting and naming those good things and then really amplifying that back out to people and recognizing when those positive things actually happen.
But also valued, right? Like, so people feel valued. I mean, I was in an organisation where there was, as part of the internal weekly email, what's going on, pretty rough and ready because it wasn't meant to take up a whole lot of time and it was really just kind of keeping people in the loop. There was always a shout out, a Monday shout out for someone who'd done something, one or more people who'd done something good the last week or gone above and beyond. And I think for me, that's also one of those really key defining moments around what sort of culture is it, that actually you are celebrating and recognising people who are doing good things, people who are doing good work and not even, yes, gone above and beyond, absolutely, but even finished a project or got something in. And I think recognising the work in a public way is really empowering and I think hugely positive to organisational culture.
And the thing is now where you've got systems like Teams and Shout Out and stuff like that, there's so many chat forums where you can also do that throughout the week now. So, and everybody could see that if you've got sort of an all of org channel. And if you don't, I suggest you put something together. And I think that organic, I call it organic feedback. It's not solicited. It's not in a structured one-on-one or anything like that. It's hey, I'm doing a shout out because I recognize that I got feedback from somebody and I think you're amazing because of that, or I saw you do something and that was amazing. And I love it in my organization. Everybody does it. So it's really important peer-to-peer. It's very important for a manager to employee, and everybody jumps in and celebrates that with you as well. And so it's actually quite fun. And because it's unsolicited, it feels really authentic.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think there's a number of things which, when you come in, assessing the culture around talking with people, seeing how things are done, but you can't underestimate how important your presence, your words, your actions is as the new CEO, and how much people are looking, watching, waiting, listening to everything that you do and say, because you are also saying what now is acceptable, what now is praised, what is rewarded, what we're going to hold people accountable for. And so I think one of the things is to go in with a real level of confidence that you actually have the ability to make a huge impact, and hopefully a hugely positive one, and really lead a great culture.
And I think one of the things we also point out is you be clear on the kind of culture that you want as the CEO as well. You set that clarity in that direction for people.
Hopefully there have been and there are continual ongoing discussions with the board around the culture, organisational culture, because I think, look, culture definitely is a responsibility of the board to set tone from the top, to check in on the culture. I mean, they've got legal responsibilities. And I think that if you're not having conversations with your board around culture, then as a CEO, I would strongly recommend that you do. It is their responsibility to be across the culture and they're responsible for it. So I think it's just recognising that this definitely is something you need to get across and also influence in a really positive way.
I would agree.
And then do a survey after you've been there for a while.
Oh.
Okay, so we have to say, for those people who haven't listened to an earlier episode where we talk about values, it is worth noting that Danielle and I have very different views about whether you put the values on the wall. And I think it is definitely worth listening to.
It is definitely worth listening to.
Even though you obviously have the wrong view around values on the wall.
Okay, we'll leave it up to the audience. We'll conduct a vote, I think.
We're going to put a poll. Values on the wall.
Yeah, that's right. Yes or no?